This episode of the Misdirected Mark podcast is brought to you by Wayward Masquerade, the creators of Bag Thulu.
This is the Misdirected Mark podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
Yes, let us pick up those mics and get on with this thing. On this episode of the Misdirected Mark podcast, we're going to feel the rough edges of games and see if they're really there to cut, scrape, or inspire us to create amazing things with our play. My name is Chris.
Ooh, I'm going to catch my breath there from that intro. Ooh, it's kind of hot.
A little hot?
Yeah. I'm Phil.
And I'm Nikki.
She's back because Bob is gone for like another 3 weeks.
Yeah, hey guys, we should probably talk about that real quick. Bob's job has a rotating schedule.
That's true.
And Bob, as we know, Bob works the night shift. But Bob also, the other shift is a 6 to 12. And historically, Bob has, even when he's got the 6 to 12, he's kind of been able to arrange things so that he can, come and host the show with us. But they're changing a few things at work, and his 6 to 12 turned into a month of 6 to 12s. And now he's not going to be able to host the show. So right now we have Nikki with us. We are considering roping in some other people for a couple weeks.
The plan is to have Glenn Seiler on the show for 3 weeks.
Yeah, from the Buffalo Fate Corps and our gaming group.
Yep.
Yeah. We like Glenn, so we've been, we hang out with him plenty, and we thought we'd test drive him behind the mics.
Because me and Phil are actually looking for somebody who can sub in for us when one of us can't be here.
Yeah, we do a lot of recording, and as you know, we don't miss
That's
shows.
true.
You're not even that well, and
I'm not.
We're not missing the show.
I haven't been well for 2 days. I recorded Down with D&D last night. I'm recording the show today.
Yeah. So if you want, I could get. I know it's your back. Rosie's got her Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shell.
Oh, cool. It can protect me.
You could put it on your back. It'll help with your posture.
It'll help with my posture.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
it'll keep you sitting up.
I need one of those things that just makes my back all straight. Oh, God, here we go.
A chiropractor?
Well, I need one of those, too.
Yeah.
Maybe a massage therapist.
Anyway, that's where Bob is. We promise we're going to return Bob.
Yeah,
Bob will make his triumphant return.
We are absolutely misdirected Mark word scramble. There you go, Bob. We are lucky enough to have Nikki around to be our backup, Bob.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we love Nikki.
Very much so.
So
It's only because I bring the coffee.
no, we love you. If you didn't bring
yeah,
coffee,
we
we
would-
love you a little bit more because you brought coffee.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And biscotti.
Yes. Very delicious, and the coffee is delicious. It's from the co-op, right?
And we're lucky
Yeah.
because the co-op right now, the coffee is 50 cents a cup.
That's
I'm going
dangerous.
to be really sad when that goes away.
Yeah, that's actually down the road from my office. I really should consider, I could just run in, grab a cup
you
of coffee,
can.
and run out.
Oh,
It's almost
run
on your
in
way to
the-
work.
In the morning, $2.99 breakfast sandwich, too.
Now that we've spent 3 minutes and 30 seconds talking about stuff that has nothing to do with gaming or anything like that,
We talked about coffee. Listen, coffee has everything to do with this show.
that's true.
Yeah.
Phil, buddy, old pal, what's going on?
So what is going on? I had family in town this weekend, so I didn't actually do very much gamey stuff. I did play some miniature golf. I did find a cool miniature golf course that I hadn't been to before.
Yeah, what's it called?
It's on some farm. It's out in Depew. But it was really good. It was 18 holes, pretty challenging. They had a ton of water hazards. You could not just blast the ball down to the other side and
Yeah, it had a little-
ricochet off the back.
A little bit of touch.
Yeah, there was some finesse going on, and there was also some retrieving balls out of the water.
Those are my favorite miniature golf courses.
I'm gonna take you to this place. This place was actually a lot of fun and relatively cheap. I think we played through at $5 or something.
They used to have one at a mall near us. The Galleria Mall used to have a
Yeah.
miniature golf course that was like that. It was indoors, but it had the turf and the sand traps and the water hazards and
Yeah.
everything like that. It was like a little miniature golf, real golf course.
Yeah, this place is actually pretty interesting. It's like somebody's farm, and then they put a miniature golf course on it, a driving range, and an ice cream shop.
Oh, nice.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, and it's great. We played through 18 holes, walked up the hill, and got ice cream.
Very cool.
So pretty delicious. Anyway, that was fun. I did a bunch of Hydra Hacker writing. I finished the gear chapter. I have 2 sections I want to rewrite, but I finished it. I'm done. It was more words for gear than I thought I was going to give, but I did a lot of examples, and then I kind of realized the examples are also kind of setting.
It's true.
You know, like I gave examples of like, you know, like the authorities drop ship that they use for troops and
It's
things.
better when you can actually combine those things
Yeah. So
and make them gameable material.
yeah, I was pretty happy. And then at the end, I did like how to make your own gear because I thought that might be important because there's no formula or anything. It's just you got to kind of feel your way through it. Anyway, I finished that. I now need to update the playbooks again because I now need to put the correct equipment into all the playbooks because now the guns actually have the guns actually have real descriptions and things like that.
Nice.
So once that's done, then I'm going to start figuring out how the order of the chapters go.
That'll actually be cool because you don't have like non-gun knowledge because I remember you and your compatriots from gaming way back in the day would like do research on guns. So I assume that the gun descriptions are actually pretty decent as far as validity.
I mean, the system's really simple, so it doesn't actually really need...
Oh, you didn't go in there and just like describe some of the guns in more detail for fun?
I didn't, but I do want to get a couple of sketch illustrations when it comes time
that's cool.
to do some. But I did I actually had to break down, I'll do this really quick and then we'll keep moving on. I had to break down the 3 types of weapons that you can have in Hydra Hacker. So there's pre-collapse where like those are like guns that we would have like nowadays, but those got all confiscated, right? The government's not going to let people run around with guns when you're looking for water.
That's true.
So the authority has weapons, and those weapons are like way better. And they're basically like, you know, rail guns, like mini rail gun kind of things. And then you can print guns because you know, there's 3D printers everywhere in your house and everything else. So you can print a gun. It's not a great gun, but it'll do. Mm-hmm. So I kind of talk about like what tags kind of go with each of those because they're like a little different. They're not a little different, but a little nuanced. Like print guns aren't as powerful and authority weapons have they're smart enabled, that kind of thing. Anyway, so I did a bunch of that stuff. So it was fun. I'm kind of glad it's done. I finished writing the chapter. And now I can kind of survey how much more writing I actually have to do when I put the chapters in order. So do that. I finished Iron Fist. Blah.
Yeah.
I finished it because I wanted it done before Defenders, and obviously Defenders is next week.
Mm-hmm.
So, blah. I will, in the after show, if we want, in a semi-spoilerish way, I will rant about why it was so terrible, but it was terrible. And then I got through a huge chunk of Season 3 Steven Universe, of which I did not realize there's already... Season 4 is out, it's just not on Hulu. You have to, like, go find Season 4.
It's true.
So I was thinking I was close to being caught up, but now I have, like, another season I need to tear through. But that's okay, because that show is delightful.
You might be farther ahead. You might be getting close to being farther ahead than me. I think I'm way behind. I don't think I've watched much of Season 4 at all.
I haven't watched any of Season 4. I'm still closing in on the end of Season 3. I'm like 5 episodes away from the end of Season 3. What's going on?
Yeah.
Let's see. What was the last...
Spoilers on for a second.
Yeah, no. I'll do one of the ones that isn't super spoilish. Steven and Connie go... they take Connie on her first mission. Mm-hmm. They take her out into the wilderness to go gem hunting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's like close to the last one I watched.
Okay.
So if you know where that one lies. So anyway, really good. Plus I found out that Cartoon Network has like 1 million t-shirts.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Because I want Crying Breakfast Friends.
Well, they're smart because they know how to merchandise.
Yeah. I want Crying Breakfast Friend t-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
I like that show.
It's funny.
Yeah. It's actually a good running gag in the
it really
show.
is.
Okay. Anyway, that's me. Nikki, how about yous?
Oh, man. So still crunch time at work. So I'm just trying to look at the small wins in my life to look forward to get me through the crazy long work weeks. So I'm looking forward to your game tomorrow because I haven't gotten to play in like 6 weeks. We get like 4 weeks off, and then the last time you guys played, I was in Boston and my internet connection was terrible. So I didn't get to play, and I was so sad that I missed that because I love my character for your game.
I know you were really heroic. You're like, I'm going to be on, and we're like, oh, but Nikki, you're going to be on hotel Wi-Fi, and like
I rushed back to my room. I like got out of class, went straight back, sat down, was so excited to join, and it just didn't.
I'm surprised you just didn't use your phone.
I did. I was on my phone.
Oh, and it even didn't pick that up?
I don't know what it was, but I was having problems with Hangouts that night and just wouldn't leave me connected for any significant period of time.
Boo.
It was really rough.
This isn't going to happen. So rather than keep interrupting the game, I just dropped out, and I was just really, really sad.
The good part is I think we can catch you up really quick, and then we're gonna get to really the crux of that story in the next like tomorrow.
I love that game world, and I can't wait till we actually write that setting down. Like,
I know.
the community we've created. It's so cool.
Niagara Cliffs.
Yeah. And then, Masks on Sunday, which is going to be super awesome with Sean joining. Can't wait to catch him up as he gets to relive some of our craziness with us.
I know.
That'll be fun.
How depending on how we bring him in, we could just be sitting in jail telling him like what happened. Yeah.
As he just overhears whose fault it is as we fight and how we got captured.
Yeah.
Ooh, could we do that? That would be so much fun.
Yeah, that'll be a thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that'll be hilarious and way better than just info dumping him. Like
Yeah.
we can just, it's fine. Like he can ask questions. Like we could have that whole role play thing.
I like exposition when exposition is done by the character telling stories.
And it helps us fill Bob in too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So for me, my life is work and gaming right now. I guess that's pretty okay.
Yeah. That's not terrible. How about you, my man?
Sorry, I'm yawning. I've been working
It's
on
not a good sign if you yawn on the show.
I know, right?
It's not. It makes people think it's not exciting.
It's true. I'm just gonna
Drink your coffee.
It's already gone. I'm gonna be really boring and subdued.
Oh my
tonight.
God! Don't
I'm
do
gonna
it.
Talk like this.
I will
I'm
fold
not-
this Mac up and I will like Jason Bourne with that book in the.
Oh,
in the
Find
Come
a
on,
Windows
man.
PC for that instead. Thanks.
What's that?
I said find a Windows PC for that instead.
Wow. Shots fired from at the end of the table.
It's a Mac. It can take it.
A couple of things. I've actually, there's a lot of things. I went and saw The Dark Tower. That movie is not as good as I was hoping it would be.
That broke my heart. I mean, saved my wallet, but broke my heart. Thanks for dodging. Thanks for taking the bullet on that one.
Yeah, it's just a little unfortunate. I mean, it's not bad. It's got all the elements from The Dark Tower, but it's smashed in a movie that has nothing to do with, in my opinion, what The Dark Tower was about. Like,
So it has a dark tower.
it has a Dark Tower.
Okay.
It has a gunslinger.
It has a gunslinger and a dark tower, and then like
It's-
all other
it's got-
relations.
It's got a man in black.
Yep,
It's
yep.
got a Jake Chambers. It's got the house with the house demon in it.
Right.
It's got the.
But then after that, it's
it's
just
got Stephen Kingish monsters in there.
just reassembled.
It
slightly
took
different.
all the elements into this whole different story. So, which is kind of disappointing.
Yeah, that's sad because that's so good.
The Rollins story is like one of my favorite stories
Mm-hmm.
in fiction, and the Rollins story in The Dark Tower isn't really the same story.
I didn't even finish that whole series of books, but for the ones I read, like it was so good.
Talk about shots fired. Senda has said, so you feel about this movie the way I do about the Lord of the Rings movies.
That no, because the Lord of the Rings movies actually followed the books. They were actually in line with what happened in the books. This has nothing to do with the books of The Dark Tower.
It's more like its relation to The Hobbit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Because The Hobbit has less to do with the actual Hobbit book.
Yeah, I mean,
than-
I actually don't have the same claim about The Hobbit compared to the Hobbit movies compared to the Hobbit book. Like, I can
That's
just go
Senda.
right along with Senda on that.
well, that's
one.
Senda's favorite. The Hobbit is.
Yeah.
Which Hobbit Senda is your favorite? Which one is it again? I forget.
Which Hobbit is my favorite?
No, Senda. Which
her
one's
favorite?
yeah? Which one's her favorite? She'll
Oh.
tell. Go on.
Oh yeah, other things. What else did I do? We played Over the Edge. That was fun. Played that. You,
That was
Nikki,
awesome.
Mike Dinos, Rob Eberzato. It was a good time. They're investigating this whatever's going on in the background. Well, first it was whatever's going on in the background with these weird nanobots and chemicals in the water, and now they're looking into a pharaoh who was the pharaoh that put these gave them their powers and put these chips in them.
Nice.
Who they've escaped from. So
Fantastically weird.
it's fantastically weird. It is. I mean, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be paranoia-esque because paranoia has the killing part, but the
Yeah.
satire part of paranoia, Over the Edge feels a lot like that to me.
I mean, paranoia's satire is just it's so fantastically wonderful. Like
Yeah, I mean, Over the Edge is more like you can play it a little bit more towards the serious side of it.
you can play Paranoia more serious. Not the current version.
Yeah, but you know how when you play paranoia serious, it doesn't feel the same.
No, it doesn't.
Like Over the Edge, I think you can push it towards that. You can push it towards the conspiracy side of it and make the conspiracies
Yeah.
feel pretty Brazil. If you've ever seen the movie Brazil,
I think that's a great. I think
Yeah.
that's. I mean, I'm sure that's a major inspiration for the game.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that. I've been working on some D&D stuff, some convention created stuff, and
Yeah.
some other D&D stuff I can't talk about.
No, you can't.
I also finished releasing the first story arc of the Streets of Avalon.
Nice.
So all 15 episodes are available at the moment from the Wednesday evening podcast All Stars.
I've been signing contracts.
Yeah, you have, because that will.
Well, can we when we get to announcements?
We're going to do we'll just do it right now. We're going to do a press announcement, and we're going to have a press release that we're going to publish or kickstart.
Well, wait. We already released one. We didn't talk about that yet on the show yet.
Oh yeah, why don't you talk about that one?
Yeah. So this came out late last week. We put out a press announcement that Encoded Designs is partnering with Tracy Barnett to produce the updated version of Ironetta.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, Tracy. We got a chance to hang out and talk with Tracy at Origins, and we had a really good conversation. And so now the Encoded team is going to work with Tracy to put out a new, an updated version of the game. Tracy's doing all the writing. It's kind of like Tracy's chance to go back and like kind of do all the things that he really wanted to do with the game. And we at Encoded are going to completely support that and then help make that into a book.
All the development, the editing, the layout, the art, the art
running the
acquisition.
Kickstarter, all that stuff. Yeah, so the whole team's on it, and we're really excited.
Publishing, fulfillment, all that stuff.
Yeah, we're super excited to work with Tracy. There's a full press announcement on the website.
I guess we'll talk about the other one next week then.
Yeah, with one awesome
Yeah.
press announcement per episode. So
but next from the Wednesday evening podcast All Stars will be Avanti. That's Emily Morgan from She's a Super Geek running her Avanti world for us, which has been going on for a while now. I also watched some Ruby. If people don't know what Ruby is, they should go to Rooster Teeth and check it out. It's really awesome. I guess the best I can call it is American anime, because it's basically all the anime tropes that you could think of in like fighters, but using fairy tales as the base characters, and it's just really good. I mean, if you like anime, it's pretty solid stuff. The first season is a little weird because they didn't have enough money for their animation budget, but as they got more popular and more money, they put together better animation. So that's really good. And I've been watching Voltron season 3.
that's when I get caught up on Steven Universe. That is where I'm going next.
I mean, Voltron season 3 has been pretty okay so far.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, Voltron season 2 is amazing. So
Yeah, that's my next one. I was like, oh, when I finish Steven Universe, I'm gonna zip over and I'm gonna hit up Voltron.
yeah, and I also watch Glee to decompress now and again because I love musicals, and I'm on season 4 now, which some of the characters are finally in New York City, which is fascinating to me. I know the show doesn't get to be as good at that point, but
I finished DCC.
oh, you finished reading it?
Uh-huh.
Very cool.
I'm gonna go run it now.
Any other announcements before I do one more announcement?
Nah.
Cool.
I'll talk about some stuff in the after show.
We're selling advertising space. We've actually almost sold all of our advertising space, at least on Misdirected Mark, for September.
Oof.
But we have other shows that sell advertising space. So if you're interested in advertising with Misdirected Mark Productions, there's a PDF on the website. You can go and click on that, see what our rates are and what shows are available. And you can send me an inquiry, and I will tell you what we're open for, because we are still open for September, October. We have slots open in there. All right. Let's do an ad now, because we, like I just said, we do ads.
Because we're selling ad space.
Yeah. Phil, I don't feel so great.
Hey, stay away from me, man. I cannot get sick. If I go down, everyone else in my family goes down.
Yeah, man, I'll keep my distance, but it's the damnedest thing. I was in this desert.
You're in a desert? You know where we live, right? There's no deserts near here.
Look, man, the house teleported me.
No. Yeah, somehow that makes sense.
Right? Anyways, I was walking across this desert called the Mirrored Steppes, and I found these ruins that were infested with traps, guardians, and unspeakable horrors.
Was Bag Thulu there? Are we doing a Bag Thulu thing?
No.
Oh, okay.
Fortunately, there was no Bag Thulu, but there were treasure hunters and bandits.
Oh, did you do battle with them?
No, man, I'm like 5'6" and I'm overweight. I let them kill each other and then watch them disable or spring all the traps for me while I watched from way, way, way in the back.
Yeah, no, that actually sounds pretty realistic.
But the place was messing with my mind. It made me ill or crazy or ill and crazy. I can't really tell. It's very confusing.
So how's this different from any other day of the week?
That's funny, man. Funny. So funny. Either way, I ran into a lion who talked to me about the secrets of the Natharine ruins, asked me riddles, and I didn't answer them correctly, so I unleashed a plague on the lands.
You released a plague on the lands?
Yeah, luckily it wasn't our lands.
Oh, well, that's better. So how did you get out of there, man?
Well, the green demon had appeared. I leapt in, slid through the coins, and appeared in the game room.
Oh, well, that's pretty handy.
Yeah. I mean, I think the house just wanted me to see firsthand what the Lion's Vault was all about.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait a second. Is this story like some clever way to do our ad?
No. Oh, okay, yeah, it is. But the Lion's Vault is neat. It's the third part of the Fate of the Four Bears Adventure Path by C2 Gaming. You can get it in print and digital.
Yeah, what about Virtual Tabletop, man?
Absolutely, and the assets are awesome. There are maps, tokens with fully fleshed out stats attached to them. It's compatible with Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, and any other virtual tabletop that exists.
Yeah, but what game is it actually for?
Well, you can get it for Pathfinder, which I know there's not very many people listening to us who play Pathfinder, but you can also get it for 5th edition.
Oh,
Dungeons
but there's
and
people who
Dragons.
listen to that.
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
Well, yeah, but what levels?
So this particular adventure is for levels 9 through 11, but you can get parts 1 and 2 as part of the Kickstarter.
Oh, that cover like the lower levels?
Yes.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
And are they on Kickstarter right now?
Yeah, they are on Kickstarter right now. You just need to go and search for Lion's Vault on Kickstarter or click on the link in the show notes.
Do. We should totally steal Ken and Robin's.
We totally
Ed
should.
music.
I can't imagine it's copyrighted or anything like that.
No, it could be. What's his face did him?
Are you ready to do your thing with the workshop?
Are we doing the metal workshop?
Yeah, here we go.
Okay, here we go. Workshop where we make better games and make better GMs and play better shit. Yeah, workshop.
It's my favorite bumper ever. I love that bumper. I hope everybody else likes that
I'm gonna
bumper.
take a drink for a second. I think
You should. I bet you messed up your throat there.
It's a little scratchy right now.
Oh, man. So tonight, we are coming at the show via an article that Martin Ralia, the founder of the Gnome Stew, wrote on his personal blog talking about a concept called rough edges. The term comes from James Malazutski. I'm going to guess that's how you pronounce his name.
I think that's reasonable.
From his Grognardia blog in 2008. We thought we would read this quote from the article. Go ahead, Phil.
Sure.
I mean, it's in your color.
It is in my color. No, it's fine. For some, tabletop gaming will simply be inadequate approximation of literature, movies, or video games. So much of the success of gaming depends on intangibles and unpredictables. There's no way you can put that in a box and sell it. Gaming has too many rough edges that can't be pounded smooth and shouldn't be. For those of us who love this hobby and have stuck with it, those rough edges are what keep us coming back. We know that there's a chance, a good chance even, that almost a given session won't be all that enjoyable or even coherent. But we also know that when everything falls into place, when everything clicks, it's an experience unlike any other, an experience to be savored and remembered for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. And he goes on to say, I don't know about you, but I don't want every session of my D&D campaign to come with guaranteed fun. That may seem odd, but it's not. Most of us, I think, if we're honest, understand that we like rough edges. We need rough edges. Something that's too smooth, too formulaic, especially in the pursuit of entertainment, will wind up producing its antithesis. So, with that said, what we want to talk about tonight are the rough edges that James talks about in his article. But Phil, we need a definition.
Uh-huh.
What exactly are rough edges in a game? In fact, why don't you break it down for me, Mixmaster V?
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about rough edges. We kind of had to read into this article.
We had some conversations about it.
We did, because this article is actually a lot bigger.
I mean, I thought the initial definitions that we came up with, or that you came up with, really, I thought they were all right. I wasn't sure how we were going to come at the concept.
Yeah.
And this ended up being a huge lift for you. I could tell.
This is a lot of brain power went into kind of putting together something that we could talk about. All right, so let's get with rough edges and kind of talk about what they are, at least what we're going to call them for tonight.
Sure.
So rough edges are the places where the game fails to meet our expectations for how the narrative should go. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, does that seem fair?
That's how we're gonna. That's what we're gonna do.
Okay. So this can come about in two ways. First of all, it can come from the mechanic rules side. And that's just when the rules of the game do or don't do something that creates a rough edge. And it means we hit a point where a rule doesn't make sense with the current narrative.
Sure. So, I mean, we've had a lot of discussion on the show about how the score with the sashes getting the sashes out of the docks didn't really work for us. Like the mechanics of the game and what we wanted to do, they didn't jive.
Yeah, and there was a whole discussion because we technically kicked them out of this club, and that should have also been a turf grab for you guys, but it kind of wasn't.
Because we didn't declare it to begin with.
Yeah, so we hit this kind of rough edge about the game. In fact, we've actually had a couple rough edges in Blades, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get in.
Yeah.
There can so right. So that's a place where rule doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's the first one. What's the second one?
The second mechanical one is it can be a rule, meaning that a rule's missing where we might need one.
So, for example, there are no social conflict mechanics that encompass more than one die roll in 5th edition D&D, so you can't have a protracted situation where the mechanics will actually support that. You have to do it basically ad hoc and how it feels.
Yeah, you can't have a duel of wits.
Correct. There is no duel of wits mechanic in 5th edition D&D.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Or at least not one that feels like it's more than just one roll.
Okay, and then we can come at it from the randomization side. So the random nature of, and I use dice rolling, but I mean we're talking about any kind of randomization tool.
Whatever your randomizer is.
The random nature of dice rolling creates an outcome that creates a rough edge. And so this can mean like the story's driving towards one kind of outcome, but when we roll the dice, it produces a different one.
For example, everyone has been down in a fight. One last PC is left and makes what should be the killing blow, and that should end the fight and save the day and all that yay stuff, and then they miss.
Right. They roll the 6 minus. Yeah. Okay. And you know, suddenly now we've hit this rough edge because we're
now everybody's probably dead.
Maybe.
Because if
depends on the game.
If the bad guy turns around and murders the person,
sure. In Dungeon World, there's a little more leeway.
Of
but
course.
but if that was 5e and you rolled a 1, and you know on the next turn the bad guy attacks
and gets a 20,
yeah,
then that's the story of how you all died.
Right.
Which that actually could be a story. I mean,
well, we're gonna talk. You and I started talking earlier this week about a topic that I think is going to come right at like for next week, where yes, everything you said is exactly true. This could be the story about how you all die, and there's some validity to that.
Yeah, I mean, can I make a statement real quick?
Yeah.
About this topic, because you're about to get into it. I think a lot of what we're going to talk about has more to do with narrativist play than it does to do with emergent play. And by emergent play, I mean letting the rules dictate what's going on instead of trying to emulate a genre.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Because there are some games are challenge based, and there's nothing wrong with that because that produces certain kinds of stories. But if the rules are about overcoming challenges and being clever, then it's not about emulating a genre necessarily. I mean, there are some hybrids.
Yeah, yep. No, I'm with you.
But what we're talking about here with Rough Edges has a lot to do, in a lot of cases, with at least the way that we've presented it, with the narrativist side of play.
Well, and I think that's because what we're talking about is we're talking about expectations, and our expectations about how stories should go come from movies and books and things like that, which is far more narrative like driven.
Sure, I mean that's a lot of story games. I mean it's not the right term, right?
No,
like
I'm with you.
But that genre of game play, it is about genre emulation, and those rules tend to try to reinforce the genre beats.
Yeah, and so when we miss those beats,
that's when we get rough edges in those kind of games.
Yes. Okay. So we know when we've hit a rough edge because it's like hearing an off note played in a song, right? Like all of a sudden we're like, well, what was that? Right? It's kind of jarring. And in RPGs, jarring often means there's a pause, where we wind up having to kind of think or look something up or start talking to the table about what do you want to do? Like, how should we resolve this?
We even have a term for that. It's called latency.
Yeah, exactly. Well, latency being the time it takes to get back.
Correct.
Yeah. And then eventually we figure something out and the game gets moving again, right? So so that's our definition for rough edges. So Chris, like, where do we get rough edges? Like, why? Why are there rough edges?
So the mechanical rough edges are the product of two things. The first one is that when you make a rule for a game, you cannot anticipate every possible circumstance or where that rule could be used.
So no, you can't.
Sometimes that, creates that dissonance, especially when it doesn't feel right, based on your genre emulation or the gameplay that you're going for. Two, it is impossible to make rules for everything in the game, so there are going to be places where the rules are lacking.
Yeah, you really can't just keep writing rules. There's a point where you stop. Yeah.
I mean, that is one of those places where hopefully you've written some rules in there that are generalized enough that allow you to improvise off them. Yeah. That whole ruling thing. That's why I love Defy Danger and Dungeon World so much, because it's a good fallback.
We're going to get there.
Yep, absolutely. All right. In randomization, rough edges appear the more you allow the dice or the randomizer to determine the outcome. There are ways you can mitigate that with other mechanics or mechanisms, like the fate point, the Benny, help assistance rules, whatever, or in the case of certain games, how you build your character up to that point.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
that is a mitigating factor. It's just not immediate. It's pre.
Yeah, what feats you took in
Yeah.
advance.
So those are all the ways that you mitigate the randomness of a game,
Yeah.
so that you can be good at the things that you're good at.
In fact, we actually do that quite a bit.
Do
If you
what?
think about it, we actually so as designers, we introduce randomizers into the game, and then as players, we spend a whole mess of time trying to mitigate randomization.
Well, yeah, because we are trying to be good at the game.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. That is pin-worthy interesting to discuss.
And
Nikki.
when we don't mechanically go around that, we try to be clever. I mean, if you've played a game with me, you see how I try to use the narrative to be clever,
Oh
the
yeah,
positioning to get
absolutely.
advantages.
Which is, I think, the reason why you like OSR so much.
It is. I mean, I
Yeah.
really do like that playstyle. It's also why I like Dungeon World.
Yeah, because the more you talk, the better position you can put yourself in.
Dungeon World's a nice.
Well, Dungeon World is
It's a nice
the
well, it's a nice hybrid of that. 'Cause it's narrative and it's challenge based.
yeah.
It's story based and challenge based at the same time.
I mean, it hits a lot of yummy spots.
not story based. It's genre based and challenge based at the same time.
Yep. All right. So rough edges aren't necessarily a bad thing,
Correct.
and they can be good actually. There are some good things about rough edges. So in terms of mechanical rough edges, when we encounter them, we need to make a ruling to bridge what the game can do and how to address the situation that brought about this rough edge.
It's true.
And I think that actually this is kind of one of the fun things about GMing.
Yeah, I mean, it's why rulings are so fun.
Yeah, like I mean, I think it's fun. Like I would rather not look through a book and try to find like some rule on, I don't know, the amount of time it takes to take off your plate mail, and just make a ruling that says like, no, you need to make like a, DC 15 check.
Yeah, I have like super strong feelings about this concept and this topic, because I think that the games that I enjoy the most are the ones that design to create rough edges.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that after the break.
Yeah. What a
Yeah, like different categories of these games
Uh-huh.
based on rough edges. All
Yes.
right. So you agree rough edges can be fun. Rulings are fun. I like rulings actually quite a bit. It's one of those things that when I read the OSR, the primer on OSR, like I was like, oh yeah, like I remember that stuff, and like for a long time I didn't do it
yeah,
because games went a different direction. All right. So anyway,
because OSR and mainstream are not the same thing.
no.
I mean, there's an emergent quality in what we call indie games or story games or whatever we want to call those games, and the OSR games that doesn't necessarily always exist in the mainstream games.
Yeah, the thing I'm referring to is I don't know if you've ever read it. It's by Matthew Finch, called The Quick Primer for Old School Gaming.
Yep, I know.
Oh, it's fantastic, right? It's a really cool little read.
Yeah, Hobbs talked about it, so
Oh, see, I need to go on Hobbs' show.
you should go listen to his shit.
Yeah,
too.
well, I'm
I
gonna
think
start
you have to
downloading.
listen to it before.
You know,
he'll
every
cut you
episode's
off.
only 40 minutes, Phil. They don't go any longer than that.
Well, I mean, that's Hobbs. He can be short. I can't. Anyway, so these rulings are an exercise in creativity with constraints, and we've
Correct.
talked about that way long ago in a past episode about why that's fun. But it is, and it can be a lot of fun. And depending on the core system of your game, how you come up with these rulings can be made easier or harder.
It's true.
Games that have good, strong central mechanics, like D20 or Fate, give us a really good path for how to make rulings.
It's true.
But if a game doesn't have a really strong central mechanic, we can kind of be all over the place trying to figure stuff out. But if you're the kind of GM who likes rulings and house rules, then rough edges can be a lot of fun in a game. It gives you a little DIY. Like, I'm going to put a little elbow grease on this thing and solve some problems. Mm-hmm. And again, we kind of talked about this already. Like, we see this with the idea of rulings over rules in the OSR community.
Yeah, and that meant that we don't need as many specific rules in a game to make the game function.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, new D&D has got a lot of that in it, because new D&D you have your 6 ability scores. When there's really just a skill check to be made, use the 6 ability scores for whatever situation it might be.
Exactly.
I mean, the rules get a little bit more codified when it comes to combat, but
Right.
other than that, it's just time to make some rulings.
Yeah, and I mean, you got saving throws as a backup.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, and when we played DCC, there was a lot of that too. It's just basically like, well, that sounds like you should probably make a luck roll.
Yeah, I mean, DCC does a great job of tossing away actual skills, defaults mostly to making attribute checks, and luck being the ultimate. Like, when in doubt, what attribute check you should make?
Go to luck.
Go to luck. Yeah.
And just to get on the other side of it, like Dungeon World's got a lot of that stuff built in it too. Rulings over rules. It's like you go use the situation, adjudicate, and then make a ruling based on the die roll.
Yeah, absolutely. So with randomization, rough edges can also be fun. When you don't know the outcome of a given situation, the possibility of what can happen in the game expands.
It's true.
That's honestly what Wandering Monsters is about, right? The idea that a dungeon was known to the DM, but with a random roll, something new and dangerous could appear.
Also, it's a push your luck mechanic.
Yeah, because the longer you sit around in that dungeon, the more chance that one of these things is going to come creeping up on you.
And you always had to walk out of the dungeon.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there was
There was no like, hey, you killed the dragon. The adventure's over. You're in town next session.
Well, it takes you a turn to walk that far, and it takes
Yeah.
you a turn to walk that far.
and you're now carrying all this gold.
And you've already spent all those hit points and resources.
Yep, now-
Oh, look. Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like the orcs came back from their patrol. There's 5 of them.
Brutal.
Yeah.
In a good way. In a way,
Yeah.
actually, I should say in a way that I'm rediscovering an appreciation of. All right. So for the players, this also creates a greater sense of uncertainty because, again, we just talked about this for Wandering Monsters. A place that was cleared out could suddenly not be clear.
It's true.
Right. So it heightens the tension of the game. Like walking out of the dungeon is a scary moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Blades in the Dark, to also talk about randomization, has the fortune roll, where the GM can just abstain from decision making, and there's a mechanic for making a roll to decide what happens. And so I actually used that in a past game where you guys were attacking one of the Sash's drug dens, and your ally Ulf, his crew, was attacking the other one. And I could have just said like Ulf's raid goes pretty well. But I didn't really want to have to make that decision, so I made a fortune roll on behalf of Ulf, and we found out that Ulf's crew did okay. Like, they did okay, but they did their job, but they got banged up.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the good part of Rough Edges is that when we don't have things scripted out and when we have to deal with something that emerges at the table, it pushes us as GMs.
That's true.
It pushes on our creativity. And it causes us to do better improv, to think on our feet, which ultimately will always make a game better, either the game you're playing or future games.
It's true.
The better you get at that.
Very true.
And it also, again, pushes our creativity because we have to incorporate random weird elements that are and non-congruent outcomes into our narrative.
It's true.
Like, we just have to make that stuff work.
Like, that was not the beat that we were expecting. How does that fit to the story?
Yeah, like, and now do something with it. Like, yeah, make that happen. And move the game forward.
Yeah.
Like, incorporate that and keep the game going forward.
Yeah, how do you charge them something for their failed roll while still keeping the game moving in a forward direction in some way, shape, or
that's
form?
really interesting. Thank you. I hadn't contemplated this when we were writing this out, but the 6- is really like a rough edge.
Well, the whole thing is.
Yeah, but I mean the 6- being the 6- is like, well, and the 7 to 9, it's a little rough, but it's usually prescribed what happens, right? Like, it tells you, like, you do X, but pick one of these. But on a 6-, depending on the way the move is written, some moves will encapsulate what happens on a 6-, but a lot of them don't.
The majority of them don't.
Right.
Because
So-
the majority of them rely on the game master to make a move.
Right. So it again forces you into that. Like, you've hit that rough edge. And I've hit it because sometimes I know exactly what I want to do on a 6-. And then sometimes I'm like, I have to sit back and think how do I want to rule on this 6-? Like, do I want to deal damage is always my least, deal damage is my my go-to if I can't think of anything else, but can I think of something more interesting that could happen in this moment?
And so the interesting thing remember how we were talking about genre emulation?
Yeah.
Like, the cool thing about when the game master gets to make a move on a 6- is that the prescribed selection list emulates the genre. Mm-hmm. So that is why it's not as rough of an edge as you think, right? Like, it's a rough edge in the good way.
Yeah, it's definitely good rough edge. And I'm just looking at what Anne just saying. A 6- doesn't have to mean failure, and she's absolutely right. It doesn't have to mean failure. It can mean a whole host of things.
Yeah.
I often don't. I often don't go straight to failure. I often go success at some sort of terrible cost is my favorite model.
Depends on what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, if there's nothing really interesting, then no, I'm just gonna I'm gonna whip back some damage on you or something. But
Well, also, it's the make the whole situation just much, much worse.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
love
that's one of my favorites.
right. But I mean, sometimes that will give you the like, oh yeah, you stab him, and 7 orcs pop through the door or something. Like
or it starts raining in the cavern.
yeah, a lot heavy rain.
Yeah. That was a 6-.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was. Most of Tony's summonings were a 6-.
That's true.
Hey, so I just talked about how awesome rough edges are. Rough edges aren't always awesome, though.
No, they're not. So the ways that rough edges are problematic is that they have a way of breaking up the flow of the game. We mentioned this a little bit before. They create latency. They create these pauses. So mechanically, when we hit a point where there's no existing rule for a situation and a quick and clear a solution eludes us, we have a problem because we have to make a choice then. Like, what do we do with that? And like I said, that creates latency. Like, maybe the situation is more nuanced than something like a simple skill check will solve. Maybe, this often arises in fringe cases of the rules, like when 2 spells interact. Like, I polymorph your Unseen Servant. Can you do that? I mean, offhand, I'll say no. But
I don't know. Like, it's a thing. Like, if I could see it with a gem of true seeing, can I polymorph it into?
But does it matter?
I don't know.
I mean, of
I
course,
might really want to.
And then I could say, just sure. Yeah, what do you polymorph it into?
Yeah, you could. You could say
now
sure.
it's the unseen version of that.
Or you could, make a will check against the, spell check DC, something like that.
Well, your Unseen Servant would, so then you're the caster. Then the caster would, and sure,
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
Like, whatever it is. Another thing is when somebody takes an action that's not expected or normally allowed in a specific phase of the game. So entering into a complex social combat in the middle of a dogfight via comms.
Yeah, I mean, that's a weird, hey, we're gonna, hey, we're chasing down that TIE fighter and let's blow, we're gonna blow it out of the sky, and then it's all of a sudden it's like, no, I'm gonna negotiate with them.
Yeah, it's if the rules say it's okay, then that causes dissonance, right?
Yeah.
Where the rules don't say it's okay, I mean, then you can rely, like if you're playing Star Wars, then you have to, what do you do? Hopefully you just rely on the genre convention of Star Wars.
Right.
Which is no, you can't do that.
Yeah,
it doesn't make
there's
any
no,
sense.
Right, no negotiation in
Yeah,
space.
there's no negotiating in space. But if the rules let you do that, or they say that you can do that, like how many times in playing 3.5 did stuff like that come up?
Oh yeah.
Because it was I think that game is fine, but it was more of an engine than it was a. There wasn't a lot of rough edges as far as there wasn't a lot of ruling spaces.
In 3.5, no.
Yeah, I mean everything kind of did a thing. Like you pressed a button, it produced a result.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pause for a second and talk. Well, no, we should talk about that after the break. There's a place where we could talk about why that game is like that.
But I wanted to bring that up because it felt like a better, a good example of that. Like if people can remember those. I mean, everybody has a story that was something like that.
Oh, absolutely.
So when these things happen, the game can come to a halt as we think about how we want to rule on this. And here's what often happens with that. Like we make a knee-jerk reaction or just say no and try to avoid these. And there are places to do that, but I mean, saying no is not always the best thing.
No, and it can cause a different disruption at the table. Like shutting a player down can
be a whole different problem.
Yes,
and we talked about that.
And if you're a 12-year-old, Phil, shutting a player down can just turn into a table argument.
Yeah.
Because
then you're like, but the rules say, and
man.
There are also times where we slow the game down to think it through or start looking in the book for an idea how to proceed, and then 15 minutes later.
Yeah, I'm actually, in the past, I was super guilty of that one.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go find this thing in the book.
And then, of course, sometimes these, like you mentioned, these degenerate from that saying no into arguments.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes players want to be right. Yeah.
So those are the problems when it comes to
mechanics.
Thank you.
That's good.
When we run into randomization, rough edges, we get into a place where it feels clear how the narrative should go, but the dice then direct the narrative in a different place. So we think it should go one way, and then the dice tell us something completely different. The most common of these is when the player goes up to deliver, we mentioned this before, the killing blow to the enemy and then rolls a natural one and fumbles.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a problem.
It's not necessarily a problem, but it feels off.
Yeah, it feels weird, especially if that enemy is like, you're outnumbering the enemy.
Yeah,
and like the fight should just be over.
Right.
Like,
It-
can we
like-
just call it?
Right, but it isn't.
Yeah, and then like well, the rules say you have to kill them.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, where's the conceit rules?
and
Like,
everybody starts like missing, and it's like, oh my god! Like, can you have you ever had that thing like where you've had like an orc with 5 hit points, and there's like 6 players, and in like 2 turns, no one can hit them.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're just like, oh, for God's sakes! Like, I mean, normally I just hand wave that, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
I'm just like, okay, how do you kill them? But if you actually play it to the rules, it's excruciating.
And sometimes it's worth it to play it to the rules because that orc is not just there as an orc in a story. It's there as an orc to deplete characters' resources.
Or it could be hilarious, like he starts depleting characters.
Yeah, that's funny. Like especially if they're wielding a 2-handed greatsword that does 2d6 plus 4 points of damage, and you're a bunch of second level characters, and they hit you and crit you.
I mean, in DCC, I wouldn't actually consider that problematic, right? In DCC,
No,
I would
I
just
mean,
laugh, right?
yeah,
Like,
right?
this is like, oh God, like, yes, you guys, like, this is how it's going to happen to you. Yeah.
So another problematic place is in skill checks for clues.
Uh-huh.
So you need to make a check to get the next clue, but you fail your check and the game comes to a halt. Hence the idea of the core clue. That's
Yeah.
why we invented that, but
Oof.
or not we, but that's why.
That's why Robin
Unlogged
Laws fixed
invented
this
it.
for us. Yes. Thank you, Robin.
I wonder though, like, there are games where like you don't get the clue. Although if it stops the game, that's bad design.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, there were Gumshoe didn't get built in a vacuum,
No, it didn't.
right? Like, that absolutely happens.
It's another one that I have a lot of strong feelings, strong and different feelings about than I used to have.
Well, I
Because-
think clue-based adventures have a very specific kind of design, and I think that when done well, even in systems where there isn't core clue and stuff like that, like Call of Cthulhu and things like that, there are ways to still make that go.
Yeah,
The problem is when people don't,
yeah,
like, because then like you're stymied.
yeah. I don't like when the game stops. Right, that's the problem.
Nobody, right? I mean, that's Gumshoe, right? Gumshoe is Robin's solution for that problem.
Yeah. Now, I think if you wanted to go with a version of that kind of game where you wanted it to be more about the players trying to be clever too and getting clues, like you give parts of the information but not like the answer. Like that's a
Yeah.
thing that I like to do. Like here's like, well, you failed. You only got this part of the clue. You only got this little bit of information. What do you do now?
Yeah, I mean, I often like on a 6- for any kind of move in a PBTA game that gathers info. I almost always give one question.
Yeah, because
I won't answer it extremely well.
I always give a question, then charge. Or
Yeah,
make
like-
something bad happen.
I mean, sometimes what I do is I'll do that. I'll make them pay for it at a cost. Like, yes, you can do that, but you have to use up the whole sample. Like,
yeah.
you can't get any more. You can't re-roll this move. Like,
Yeah.
But the other thing I'll do is I'll give a question, but I won't elaborate on the answer very well.
It's true.
Like,
Yeah,
I won't lie.
it's true. 'Cause I've seen you do it.
Right. I just won't offer too much more. Like, use what you got.
So in these cases, the rules have not failed us, but rather the randomization of the roll caused the narrative to go in a way that differs from our expectation, which in some ways is this. I mean, if we're going to use procedures and mechanisms being different from the randomizer, then yes, that is true. That would be it. So folks out there, that's what we're talking about. When these happen, they can have several effects on the narrative of the game. They can halt progress, as we mentioned. They can push the narrative into a place you were not prepared for. So, oh look, you got TPK'd accidentally. Now what do you do?
Yeah, what are we playing next?
Yeah, or does everybody just get captured? Or is that do we just roll new characters and start over because it's really just a kind of dungeon crawl, right? And then they can create an off note where everyone's emotions drop and their engagement lessens. So that's that thing with the orc that it takes 3 rounds to kill it.
Like, everybody's
It's like,
just,
really?
yeah, like, oh God, this is laborious.
Yeah, I mean, because nothing happens, right? Like, especially if the orc doesn't hit anybody any of those times. It's like, well, what did we do? We just wasted
Yeah, and nothing
a bunch of time.
nothing is more of a wet blanket than 2 rounds of everyone missing.
It's true. It's true.
Everybody, no group loves that.
Yeah. In either case, the bad side of rough edges is that they mess with the flow of the game. So like we said, it causes the game just to flow, splutter, sputter, halt, stop, whatever. And when that happens, when the flow begins to slow down, that's when players tend to lose focus and distractions begin to creep in. People start picking up their phones. People start having side conversations. Also, immersion can break if your game prioritizes that. If your game prioritizes playing in the character level, this is a great way to break the players out of that
Bad
level.
rough edges will get you every
Yeah.
time. By the way, splutter.
Hey, whatever.
I just didn't want that to go by unnoticed. Bob's in the room. He's
Did
probably
did
like,
he say splutter?
yeah, you said splutter. Bob's probably
No,
like,
I did say splutter. I was
yeah.
like, Bob's like
splutter. That's not even a word.
It's suffer.
What's terrible is I didn't even pick up on that. I just assumed you meant to say it.
I did. In fact, no, I didn't. I meant to say sputter.
Yeah, it's not. Splutter is not in the.
We invent enough words, and I'm just used to it.
That's true, right? We do invent a bunch of words.
Bob's saying splutter is a word. Really? Splutter?
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate
Sputter
you
is a
covering me there.
word. I'm gonna look.
So,
looking right now.
so once we get
It is
stuck,
a word.
Yeah, once we get stuck in that space though, like of where momentum has gone away, we're struggling then to regain that momentum, and we have to do a bunch of work to find that flow, that narrative flow. Or
Sorry,
that-
I'm still stuck on the fact that splutter is a
that
word.
flow
Sorry.
of play.
And the definition.
Yeah, and thanks, Bob.
So before we get into any questions with the chat room, we need to first address the ethereal summons of our plushie master.
Yes.
So-
Obey.
Obey Bag Cthulhu and the Bag Cthulhu haiku from Wayward Masquerade. So this is our ongoing contest throughout the month of August. We are looking for people to send in their haikus, and you can put them at. You can send them to chris@misdirectedmark.com. You can put them on the Facebook page. You can put them on G+. Heck, you can tweet them to me if you can fit it in there, at misdirectedmark. I need to know, though, that it's like you have to hashtag Bag Cthulhu or something on there so I can see it. Otherwise, I won't notice that
Yeah,
it's actually a haiku
exactly.
from Bag Cthulhu. But here are some more haikus that we got in the last week. Cthulhu has a bag. It is a very scary bag. Really is cold. I feel like that's cheating, don't you? Making is a very scary. Then they put bag on the next line, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is that proper haiku form?
I mean, they wrote it in proper haiku form, so I had to read it the way that I read it.
yeah, no, that's
Right?
fine.
Really, let me do it one more time just so I can show you how
Yep.
ridiculous it is. Cthulhu has a bag. It is a very scary bag. Really is cold.
Yeah, I think somebody stretched on the syllable.
Yeah. Oldest angry god. Some guy chants on spooky beach. Old angry god bag. Actually, I like that one.
Yeah, that's good. I like
Yeah.
that.
And the last one. Bag Cthulhu sealed tight. Unaware mortal fools. Inside awaits doom.
No, I like that one. That one's good.
Or dice. Inside awaits dice. That was the add-on that they put on the end of it. I really like the haiku, and then they put the add-on. They're like, that's cheap and cheating and funny at the
Yeah,
same
but the
time.
Dune parts. I mean,
Yeah,
if
the-
we just cover up the bottom part, it's
Yeah,
definitely
it's
solid.
legit. I think it's one of our front runners. At the
Yeah,
moment.
and it's got Bag Cthulhu in the title.
Uh-huh.
And we do like that.
All right. Well, these haikus were brought to you by Wayward Masquerade, which, Phil, I hear the mother of dragons' crazy aunt is coming to town.
Seriously, are you talking about what I think you're talking about?
That depends. Do you think we're talking about scaly creatures with claws and breath weapons who have wings?
I think that's exactly what we're talking about.
I mean, why would you think we're talking about flying hydras?
But I thought...
No. Well, in any case, it's coming soon, so keep your ears here to hear what Wayward Masquerade is sewing up next. So,
Awesome.
What's going on in the chat room for life? Anybody have any questions?
I'm totally not instigating anything.
Well, I mean, of course you are.
Super chatty, man. Well, first of all, let me formally apologize. I did not know splutter was a word.
That's okay.
Sputter, I knew was a word. Splutter, I didn't. But man, did you know splutter was a word, or did you stumble into it?
I mean, I was pretty sure that splutter was a word, but I did mispronounce it.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure I've written splutter in one or two stories.
Yeah, that's
when I was in college. So
Yeah, well, there
it's
we
not a
go.
word that I commonly use. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it's not one that I commonly use either. Anyway, that's good.
Is there anything else in the chat room? Or
Oh, well, there is a question.
Oh,
But
okay.
what I was going to say is we were talking chat room for life ad, thinking that's coming.
You want a chat room for life ad?
Yeah.
Yes, we'll
I think
totally do
so.
an ad for the chat room.
So the
Your guys'
rates.
The rate
your
sheet's
guys'
up.
The rate sheet's up.
Oh, I know. It's already been posted in the chat. I've already looked at it. Like, this is a thing. This is a thing.
Apparently, the chat room for life wants an ad. Okay.
All right. So JJ had a question for us. Aren't rulings informed by the genre as interpreted by the GM? What makes that rough as opposed to smooth?
I think smooth is that it's actually not there. Like smooth is that the rules are already there and you didn't have to actually like combat. There's no ruling. Like there's no ruling in a to hit roll. Like we just know how to do a to hit roll.
It's true.
That's smooth. What we don't know in like a BX game is I want to do a shield push.
Yeah, I want to hit him with my shield and knock him
and push him
5
back.
feet.
Yeah, like
There's probably no rule in the game for that.
right. So we have to make a ruling for that.
That's why Power by the Apocalypse games are weird, because they tell us how to do it. It's turning the rough edge into a smooth in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think very much in like games, OSR type games and things like that, is where those rulings kind of come in. Because if we look at like 3.5, there's a rule for shield bash.
There is.
Like we can just go in the book and read it.
That means anybody who tries to shield bash, unless I'm not sure if it's a move that you can make or like
I think it's a combat maneuver.
Yeah, if it's a combat maneuver, then you don't necessarily need a feat to do it, but you have a bunch of negative modifiers to try to do it without the feat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like I guess maybe there's kind of our, like, if we wanted to look at that one rule, like that one action in a BX game, I'm gonna have to make a ruling. Like I'm gonna have to say, like, okay, you have to hit the guy because you need to use your armor. You know, like you need to hit him to actually hit him with the shield. But then I think you're gonna make opposed strength checks or something. Okay, and you know. And if you win your strength check, you're going to push him back.
Yeah, I also don't believe that all games are about genre emulation.
No, I don't think so. I think.
Well, I mean, because JJ mentioned something about genre emulation.
I to be clear, I think most games have a genre, but
Of course.
genre emulation.
Yeah, the rules of the game aren't there to emulate the genre. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. All games have genres. Not all games are genre emulating.
Correct.
Yeah, like that's my
And
classic.
the better
finger
thing
of
is,
thumb things.
all games don't have mechanics or mechanisms that emulate the genre.
That's a better way to say it.
Yeah.
Like for instance, Night Black Agents, very much genre emulating.
Yes.
But
yes.
I mean, very much, because mechanics such as preparedness and network are there to emulate the kind of stories that you would tell in a game that you can't really do in a regular role playing game.
I really think it's I mean, yes, you're right. Those are very genre emulating mechanics, mechanisms, I should say. The Conspiramid is actually the better one, because that's like, okay,
Right.
Game Master, go build your Conspiramid. This is a procedure for how to build your campaign, and this is emulating the idea of a conspiracy
I agree.
in the back of your
Yeah,
game.
I agree. I mean,
I think both of those things.
I think very much that whole game is very much about.
How the rules are called, like dust or mirror, like
Yeah.
how the settings, you can turn the knobs on that,
Right.
which will then provide different emulation experiences.
Right, but like for instance, like Fate is not genre emulating. Fate doesn't have a prescribed genre.
It's true.
There are Fate supplements that alter Fate Core,
Yeah.
or Fate Accelerated to be genre emulating, or more genre emulating, or they just give it a genre.
Yeah, I mean,
There's
there's an argument to be made that Fate Core is emulating Two-Fisted Pulp.
I think. Let me see if I can pick this apart. I think, and I'm going to use Savage Worlds instead of Fate.
Sure.
I think Savage Worlds produces a Two-Fisted Pulp experience, no matter what genre you dip it into. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's fair? Because I think you're right. I think that game creates a Two-Fisted Pulp feeling, no matter what you do with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why it works well in some places, and then it kind of like it works fine when we're playing superheroes. It works less fine when it's Cthulhu, because you really shouldn't punch Cthulhu and explode your dice 10 times and knock his ass out.
Unless you're playing Shotguns versus Cthulhu.
Yeah, then
it's fine.
Right. Well, then if it's right. So yeah, I mean, I like JJ's question. There's some real nuance.
It is a good question.
There's some real nuance in there. But to go back to kind of that thing about the shield push. So like a BX game, you're going to have to make that up. That's a rough edge.
Yeah.
But in 3.5, I just have to go look in the book and read what it says. Like, you're going to take an attack of opportunity. You're going to, make an attack. And if successful, you push the opponent back by 5 feet. That's not a rough edge.
Correct.
That's smooth. That is part of the rules. And then in Dungeon World, I need to ask, really, what is your outcome? Like, what is it you want to do? Do you want to push him back? Do you want to harm him? Or do you want to keep him away from your friend? Because what move I select is going to have a lot to do with what your intent is. Like,
That's true.
if you're like, well, I want to shield bash him because I want to kill him,
Well, then you're
hack
kinda-
and slash.
You're hack and slashing.
I
yeah.
want to shield bash him to keep him away from Bardak.
That's defend.
That's defend. And if I want to shield bash him to push him over the edge,
That's defy danger.
yeah, defy danger strength. Probably.
Probably.
Yep, I agree. Okay, yeah, we're in. I mean, I'm tight with you on this.
Yeah, and that's why that's always a weird space right there, the Powered by the Apocalypse, because I was talking about, when we were talking about this earlier in the week, I was like, there are games out there that are designing for the rough edge. They're designing for the ruling, to focus down where the ruling is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I always, in Powered by the Apocalypse, am not interested in the move until you tell me what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah. So here, if you don't mind me trying to make a metaphor of this for a second. So a rough edge, say you have a piece of wood that is just not sanded at all. That's when you have rough edges. Like,
Yeah.
you have to like look at it and be like, well, that's the part of the wood we're gonna deal with right now.
Yeah,
Or that's the
exactly.
part of the wood, and we're gonna do this, and this to it. The smooth one, we've already sanded all that stuff down, so we have all the notches and spaces that we need.
already
We don't
there.
have to build anything or carve anything out of it. The middle part of that is we've already sanded some of that, but we've left it customizable. Like, we can still carve out some things here and there.
Yeah, we can do the fine work.
So that is the terrible analogy that I came up with.
And the other question from Jonathan: why does having a rule signify having a smooth edge?
Well, I think only in the fact that when we defined at the top of the show, we defined the mechanical rough edge as a place where there isn't an existing rule. Because if there was an existing rule, we can smoothly keep going because we already know what to do. If you don't know what the rule is and you have to stop and look, that's not a rough edge. That's system mastery.
Correct.
Because if I have great system mastery, I don't need to look up what shield bash does.
Although we did talk about having to stop in the game and go look up rules.
Yeah, but there's a difference between the rule exists and I don't know it. That's a system mastery issue versus I go into the rule book not so much to look for the shield bash rule,
Figure out how to interpret it.
but I'm looking for something that's like the shield bash rule because I want to make a ruling that's consistent with the rest of the book.
Correct. That's cool. Like,
Yeah.
that is a better way to describe that. Yeah, absolutely. That is. Yeah, I have nothing else to add.
Okay, I'm gonna just tell you that my new earbuds that I switched to are not staying in my head, and like I constantly have to keep pushing them into my
Just looks like you're pushing your brain that's kind of melting out of your head back in constantly.
I'm trying to keep my brain in here. I have to keep these plugs in, otherwise it's going to leak out all over the table.
Lord of the Rings, not the same as the Dark Tower Sunday. Okay, moving on.
Aw.
Are we talking about the continuum of rough edges now?
Oh,
think you guys are.
that sounds exciting. All right, so we spent the first half of this segment talking about the pros and cons of rough edges. And the truth of the matter is, rough edges are always going to be present in a game. You just cannot get rid of all of them for just the reasons we talked about.
Yeah.
There's too many different ways a game can be used. And that is okay. Because it's impossible for a designer to remove all the rough edges. The goal of a designer is, if we think of the use of the game as a bell curve, the goal of the designer is to make sure that the center of the bell curve is smooth and not worry so much about the tails. The more you worry about the tails, either the more complex the game is about to become or the longer the manuscript is about to become.
I will counter you
Counter away.
with you talking about the bell curve, right?
Uh-huh.
Of like, these are the rules that are smooth, these are the rules that are rough.
Not so much the rules. The bell curve being what is actually going to be used in play. So, like, in the course of play, if 80% of my game is combat, my combat rules should be fairly smooth. They don't have to be super smooth, but most of combat should be handled in this section, and the weird shit for combat falls on the outsides. Does that make more sense?
It does.
Yeah, not so much word count.
Are we talking about... So here's the thing I guess I just don't understand.
Uh-huh.
When we're talking about the rough edges, we want the stuff in the middle of that bell curve to be smooth then?
I think so. I guess let me...
Because I just want to say that I'm not saying that that's wrong.
no, it's okay.
There's another design philosophy where you take the middle of that, you lower it down, you try to flatten it out as much as you can so that you have flexibility.
I think that's also... Boy, man, that's a whole other...
topic.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic.
I mean, it's the thing that I've been
you pin
shouting.
that?
That's the thing I've been shouting about since we started talking about this, like designing for the ruling.
Yeah, let's...
Bob isn't going to be here for a month. You guys need to record some of Bob's shticks and just put it on the soundboard.
What? Like
It's not so
we're
much a
going
shtick,
Like
long.
his ding.
Yeah, it's not so much a stick
just-
as we need you to actually write that down somewhere so we don't
Yeah.
forget
Okay.
it. Like, that's a future show episode.
Okay.
Ding,
Ding,
we're going
and then
long.
But
we'll-
I mean, that's what we need. We need that. We need him to record the I'm going long.
I'll just go.
or we're
I
going
mean, I
long.
can suppose I can go find them. I may have to find some time to do that. This month's been kind of crazy. It's going to be kind of crazy. So
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I want to have... we can have that as a much a much bigger discussion. That's really good. I like that a lot. All right. Anyway, so it's impossible. Designers can't remove all rough edges. It's just not possible.
And they tried. It's called 3.5.
And 4.0.
No, 4.0 had tons of rough edges. All the skill checks were rough edges.
No, well, yeah. That was actually more like a giant gaping hole, but yes, it did produce a lot of rough edges.
Yeah, that
Anyway,
giant gaping hole was a rough edge.
yes, but the combat system was over smooth.
Yeah.
Okay. So the good parts of rough edges is actually something that I think makes RPGs special, and a different experience. And that's actually going to be our topic next week about how it's different from a video game, a book, or a movie. But because of their detriments in a game, rough edges can also be problematic. So there's a certain amount of them we have to kind of get out of a game.
It's true.
And thus we get to a place where we kind of wind up with a graph. And we're going to not talk about this quantitatively, but qualitatively, where the number of rough edges versus the type of rough
And
edges.
for those who don't know what quantitative is versus qualitative, I defined it later, so it's fine.
Yeah. So we wind up, if we do that, with two axes, infrequent on one end and frequent on the other. So the occurrence of a rough edge. And its opposing axis of good rough edges, right? The kind of things we talked about that are fun, versus the bad rough edges. Okay. So if we do that, we actually wind up with 4 quadrants.
It's true.
And we took some liberties in defining these quadrants.
Now, can I just say something? I'm totally on board with this. I was thinking about it pretty hard for the hour that I had a chance to look at it.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if this is the only spectrum of where there could be.
No, I don't think this is the only. This is
okay,
just
this
in
is
the
just-
framework of what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, I mean, even there could be more than this, and I'm sure at some point in the future we'll probably change our minds since now we've come to some conclusions about this. And as we normally do, 3 months later we'll be like, we have a whole different theory on this.
The beauty of the show is that it just keeps going on. So shit we said it like 2 years ago,
Yeah, it's
we could totally
completely
say
different.
completely different shit
yeah,
later.
it happens.
We are free. That is not a thing we are constrained by.
That's true.
In this moment, we're talking about 2 axes for this.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about one of these quadrants.
So there's the good frequent axis or sector, I should say. I mean, if this was the Star Trek map, I think we'd be in the Gamma Quadrant.
Easy. We can have a whole
No,
discussion.
not the Gamma Quadrant, the other one.
The alpha.
No, not Alpha, because Alpha would be the stable one.
Oh, delta.
Yeah, Delta. That's challenging,
Okay.
right? And the upper
Anyway,
right. Yeah.
let's,
Okay.
let's not get all Star Trekky at this moment.
So these are challenging. So these are games where there are a lot of rough edges, but they are good ones. They're the kind of rough edges that the people that are playing the game want.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when Phil mentioned quantitative versus qualitative,
Mm-hmm.
quantitative would be using data to make specific.
Yeah, numbers.
Numbers
Like how
and things like
many
that.
how many rough edges are we hitting
Yeah.
per game session?
We're
whatever.
talking about qualitative, which means this is all very opinion
Yeah, it
based.
feels.
So if you want, if this is the kind of game that you like, then this is the kind of game you're looking for.
Yeah, don't pin us to the wall on this shit about numbers. We're talking about theory.
Well,
here.
just in case people were wondering.
No, it's fair. It's fair.
Yeah. So
So challenging
these
games.
Yeah, these games often have clear central rule systems that make a strong foundation. These are things like 5th edition D&D,
Mm-hmm.
Dungeon World. DCC has a pretty strong core to it.
Where do you think? No, I'll wait. I'll ask you about it. I'm going to ask you about Blades after we've done all 4 quadrants.
Yeah, okay. They can have a lot of randomization, but the game supports or embraces that randomization.
So that's very much DCC.
Yes.
Like DCC loves the randomization.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And these are games that keep the GM on their toes. And overall, the play experience is hard to anticipate, but overall is very enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're games that they're challenging to run or play, but like we run them and we're like, yeah, that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a good time. I remember fun being totally qualitative
Yeah.
and nuanced with so many, with 8 different levels of fun.
And I've been trying to use games, the 3 games that I've been mentioning, DCC, Dungeon World, and D&D 5e. DCC is sort of an OSR type game. I don't know if it's considered part of the OSR. I think it is. I mean, it might as well be. I don't know.
It
feels like it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I mean, it's OSR in that I think it embraces all of the OSR-ness.
Mm-hmm.
It's just new.
And then D&D is mainstream.
Yep, absolutely.
very
Very
mainstream.
trad, mainstream. Yep.
And Dungeon World is very what people would call indie narrativist
Yeah,
story game type
absolutely.
stuff.
And I love actually all. I love all of those.
And I think for me, all 3 of those games fit in the challenging category.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like I said, this is qualitative, so I can say that.
Yeah, no. I think that's. I don't think there's anything wrong with that statement. I will concur.
Tell me about Bad Frequent.
Sure. So, Bad Frequent Rough edges. These are games where there's a lot of rough edges. They're just not always the good ones.
Oh,
These are games where the rules aren't clear or have large gaps in the rules. So suddenly we just don't know what to do. And it's not clear. Like, we don't have a good central mechanic to get our way out of it. Sometimes the randomization is too swingy or needlessly random to the point where kind of everything feels arbitrary. Like, we're just like, I don't even know what's the point of this game. Like, why? Like, what's the point of me making decisions when everything's, not going to work?
yeah, absolutely.
And these games are tiring for GMs to run. Like, when you've run a problematic game, like, you just come out of it, you're like, "Phew, that was tough." And overall, the play experience is kind of jarring and arbitrary. You're just like,
You know what game really did this to me? Worlds in Peril.
yes,
That game was problematic for me.
yes.
I know there's a bunch of people out there that play Worlds in Peril that had a really easy time with it.
And I
had a good
wanted to
time
love
with it.
that game.
Me too, right?
Truthfully, our Worlds in Peril characters, we just made them too early. They would have worked great in masks.
They really would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would have been fantastic mask characters. Nikki's character. No, not Nikki. Nikki wasn't in that game.
Correct. It was, Jesse.
Yeah, but it was Dave I was thinking about. Dave's character.
character?
Dave's character was very much a masks
Oh,
character.
yeah. Dave's character should have been a Masks character.
Yeah. And Tony. Tony
I mean,
was...
Of course,
Tony was the delinquent. That's what I think where I was going. Tony was the delinquent character. In fact, Tony's character and Nikki's character actually have a lot of things in common between those two games. And as I remember me in multiple occasions having to break up fights with authorities
That's true. That's very true.
as I stare at Nikki.
I don't know what you're
Yeah,
talking
and
about.
Dave's character, Amp,
mean,
I
it's-
think his name was Amp. He was the outsider.
Yeah.
Totally the outsider, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree with you. You know what game I actually will put in problematic, even though I love the game? So, because games fall into these categories does not mean you can't love them.
It's true.
Corporation at times was problematic. There were a lot of holes in the rules about how certain equipment and cybernetics worked, to the point where I had to make a lot of like complex rulings, like not easy ones at the table, but like ones I had to actually think about afterwards. So, I mean, I love that game, but it was problematic in some ways. Okay, switch over to good and infrequent.
All right, so these are considered predictable games. Now, these games, there's not a lot of rough edges, but the ones that occur are of the good type. So they have a strong core mechanic, or they have an extensive set of examples and precedents that make rulings intuitive. And they have some element of randomization in the rules that doesn't really come up too often. I mean, this almost describes Fate for me.
I was going to say this actually describes Savage Worlds for me.
Yeah?
Yeah, Savage Worlds is a super strong mechanic. When in doubt, it's a skill or attribute check. Get a 4.
I mean, for me, Fate is like, what is it? Which of the 4 actions are you taking?
Yeah. I mean,
Roll the
it's-
dice. It's going to be pretty much near your score.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, I mean, one of my things about Savage Worlds is that sameness. Like, after I've played it for a while, I'm like, I'm getting pretty much the same experience out of this thing constantly. You know, I don't. The challenges that arise in Savage Worlds for me often are because dice exploded,
Yeah.
not because of anything else. Like, everything else in the game is pretty much predictable mechanical wise, but occasionally somebody just like pops like one of those crazy runs of exploding dice, and I'm like, oh, I got to deal with this thing. Like, oh, you just one-shotted like a dragon with like, a dart. Sure. Let's describe how that happened.
Yeah. So that for me, for Fate, right? Like, it's like same thing in a lot of ways as Savage Worlds, except like you like a character builds up their fate point supply and the aspects on the table, and then they just burn them all, and that like the game feels like that's just kind of how the game plays.
Yeah, I mean, no, and you're not wrong, and there's not anything wrong with predictable, right? Like,
I actually really like Fate a lot.
I like actually both Fate and Savage Worlds a lot, but they are very predictable. I think very predictable games.
They play the same.
All right, let's talk about bad and infrequent.
Yes, do hit me with what stable means.
Yeah, so we're going to call these games stable. These are games where there aren't actually too many rough edges. When we do hit one, it's not a good one. But they usually have like complex subsystems that aren't always easy to rule upon. And the randomization mechanics sometimes produce like weird bad edges, but not often. These games are easy to run, but every now and then the game kind of grinds to a halt when you hit one of these edges, because you just like, you've been on a roll and everything's fine, and then you hit one of these edges and you're like, oh, I don't even know what to do with that or where to find that. But the play experience for these are actually fairly consistent but you'll occasionally just have like the bad session every now and then. I'm trying to think of a game where I would classify them as stable.
I'm trying to figure out where to fit Blades in the Dark in this continuum.
I'll
for
tell
myself.
you where I want Blades in the Dark, because I think it's right. I have it as challenging. Like, I'm enjoying running that game quite a bit, but I am tired at the end of a session from trying to keep up with how the rules kind of work together, because there's a lot of rulings that go on in terms of clocks and how clocks link together, and exactly how, for instance, when we did the social score, like, there was a lot of ruling that went into doing the social kind of score as opposed to doing the smash and grab. Like, the smash and grab scores were super easy for me to run, but how to do that complex negotiation in the game, like, I think we did a good job of it with like the competing clocks.
It was good.
But I mean, we had to make that up. Like, we had to sit there and be like, okay, I'm going to make a clock for each point you want to make, plus a clock when they're done negotiating, and we're going to fill up. And as these clocks fill up, you're going to get certain concessions from them. But if I fill up the end of negotiation clock, we're done.
Yeah, that is the base of the clock, though, right? Like, that's the purpose of the clock.
Yeah, but when you read the clock section of the rules,
Doesn't do that?
It hints that maybe that's a thing you can do, but like, I made a ruling on that, right? Like, that was my decision. Like, we could have just had 2 clocks. Like, here's what you want, here's what they want. Whoever fills their clock first. Like, that's a standard race clock, but that's not how we did it.
Yeah, I'm in some weird space where, for me, if I was going to put Blades on the continuum, it's sort of in that stable space for me, which I know that seems weird, but because I understand how the cycle of the game works.
Yeah, but that's okay. It could be challenge. I mean, first of all, these quadrants aren't binary. They're analog.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's fine for this to be somewhere between challenging and problematic, or challenging and stable.
It's kind of towards the middle, right? Like, it's in that stable, challenging, predictable space.
It very well could land. It very well could land at the kind of the 0-0.
Yeah, because I don't think it's problematic. I don't think there's rules missing.
No, I don't think it's problematic.
I don't think the rough edges are bad rough edges. I just don't think it's it always produces the experience that you're expecting it to.
Yes.
But I also don't think I understood what the game was, and I don't think any of us understood what the game was for a long while.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, if we add into this that there is a system mastery component to this as well. I think as we're understanding what the game is better,
Yeah.
some of the other parts are kind of more illuminated. Like, okay, now I'm starting to, like, I understand why this thing's here, or, oh, now I understand why consequences, stress, and the ability to buy off any consequence is good but bad. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I like I said, I'm leaning towards challenging for it, because I get what the core rules are to this game. Like, I have no problem. It's very stable in that respect. It's challenging for me because there are a lot of rough edges in terms of how am I going to emulate the thing you want in the clock and roll system. Is
Yeah.
it one roll? Is it a clock? That kind of thing.
Also, are we expecting the game to do something that it's not really prescribed to be doing?
Yeah.
Because I feel like, I'm not sure if Blades is an emulation game. It feels like it's an emulation game that's not an emulation game.
I mean, I think
it wants to emulate a genre, but it doesn't really. I mean, and the stuff in there is supposed to be emulating a genre, but it doesn't always emulate the kind of genre that we think it'll emulate.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, again, this is where I think it falls into kind of, for me, challenging, but certainly, it's not on the high end of challenging. It's like closer towards challenge stable. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about these categories. It's easy to make these categories. Like we said, it's not a was it quantitative? It's not quantitative.
Yeah, it's not quantitative.
It's qualitative.
Like, we're not sitting there with a book and measuring the shit.
Yeah. So here's the important thing to take away from all this. For each person, for each one of us out there, for each gamer, there's a sweet spot of rough edges in a game that you want. Too few and the game can feel too programmed or slick to you. Too many and the game can feel incomplete or broken. Once again, these will be based on the group. That's just the way it goes. And how you feel about the game. We just threw a whole bunch of examples out there for you and me.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So in order to understand that, I hope you're a little more cognizant of those rough edges and realize what role they're playing in your enjoyment of the game. That was one of the whole reasons for doing this whole topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hope that that helps. But before we even get out of here, why don't we do applications of rough edges?
Yeah, so let's now that we've talked about rough edges, we're gonna actually cover a few things that we actually talk about in the show kind of frequently, and kind of talk about how they apply to rough edges. So I'll talk about really quick about house rules. So we mentioned that rough edges can result in rulings, and as we create solutions to these mechanical gaps that we encounter, we can lessen the rough edges in a game and actually push a game from one quadrant to another through house rules. Because as we create rulings, if we codify them, we no longer have to make that ruling on the fly anymore, and rather we can have it. We can reference a previous ruling. So, for instance, in our BX example for Shield Bash, if we write that thing down at the end of a session, we no longer have to wonder what a Shield Bash is. We can just do that again.
Yeah,
And there's rules and there's reasons for doing that, right?
Until like that shield bash was against an orc, now you're trying to shield bash a giant.
Yeah, but I don't know. Depending on how you do it, I said make opposing strength checks. Giant's got a strength.
It does,
And it'll just push your ass over because you shouldn't be shield bashing a giant.
unless you succeed, then it looks weird, right?
Yeah, but then, narrate that. Why does that, how could you have possibly toppled that frost giant? Explain it to me.
I mean, you could say that.
You can say that. You can say that. You don't have to. You could just make up a new ruling every time.
Yeah,
Or you can choose to codify a ruling into a house rule.
it's the argument for why designing for the rough edge is a good idea, or leaving the rough edge there is a good idea, because you can constantly make the ruling then instead of codifying.
Yeah, but if you want to actually smooth out a game,
Oh yeah, absolutely. If the goal is to make your game codified,
yeah, if you want to smooth out your game, then start codifying them in house rules. And so here are a few tips. Look at your big rulings at the end of a session. So after the session's over, kind of go back and look at hey, what were the couple of those big decisions I had to make? And if you like them, convert them into house rules, actually write them down. Write them down somewhere shareable. I love Google Docs for this, right? Everybody in the group has access to it. Here's where I wrote that rule. You can have a talk about it. Hey, here's the thing I'm coming up with. Are you guys kind of all on board? Does that make sense to you? Kind of thing. And then put it out in a shareable location. Also, finally, recognize precedents. So if you have a ruling that is similar, you have a new case that's coming up, a new situation in the game that you're about to make a ruling for, and you've made something similar in the past, model it off that. There's a thing for consistency of rules. People like consistency of rules. Rules that aren't consistent, that feel arbitrary, make people squicky. So if you've said in the past, for instance, the shield bash thing against the difference between an orc and a frost giant, if they're pretty close, but I've changed it a little because it's a giant, then that's okay. Because it's oh yeah, that's kind of like an orc, but I recognize you made a change because it's a giant. But if I come up with a completely different ruling for it, then it's well, I don't know. Every time I'm going to shield bash something, you're going to make a different rule for it. That seems weird. You know what I'm saying? It's not that it's wrong. It's that when we don't have predictability of rules.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah, when we don't have predictability of rules, it can make us uncomfortable. Hey, talk about off-label use.
So there are times we decide to take a game and use it for something it's not designed for. Now, when you do this, you're probably going to find new rough edges. You might even be shifting the game from the quadrant into another one. In all likelihood, you're going to be moving the game towards the problematic space since you're trying to make it do something it's not designed to do. You'll find some rules gaps. There will be rules that don't fit the theme or the tone of your game. You'll get that genre dissonance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's when it's time to put on the designer hat and house rule the game back where you want it.
Yeah. And I mean, and again, nothing wrong with that. And we use the term off-label use from the pharmaceutical industry where sometimes doctors prescribe drugs not for the thing the drug was made for, but because it also does another thing. And the thing that's always told is when you use it off-label, your results may vary.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you get the hacking and drifting, and the rechassis of old school games.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Stars Without Number, right? Stars Without Number is D&D in space.
Yep.
That when they initially pushed that over to that space, it became problematic, and then they went in and tweaked a bunch of things till they got it back to probably stable. Okay.
Want to tell me about Play Better Games, damn it?
So listen, you and I talk about this all the time, and if we left this segment without acknowledging it, I think we would get called out later.
It's probably accurate.
So we always talk about this: play better games. And in the past, what we would say is like, if you're modding a game so much that it stops looking like the original game, maybe you should just go find a better game. Right? That's been like kind of our, like modding it too much is a sign that maybe this isn't the best fit for what you want.
Or just go and then publish your game.
Yeah, or just go make a game. Right?
That's that's gonna be my new thing. Like, if you're gonna mod it so much, either go find a new game or publish the game that you're making.
Yeah.
so I can play it.
So I think with the concept of rough edges, we can kind of refine our statement about play better games. And if the game you're playing has more bad rough edges than good ones, and that it falls into the problematic quadrant, then perhaps you should seek out a game that has less bad rough edges and more good ones.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think that's what we're trying to say is like, you can stick with the girl that you brought to the dance. Like, but if you're really deep in that problematic space, like, either do something in the game to push it back into a quadrant, or go find another game that's sitting more comfortably in a better quadrant.
I don't disagree at all.
Okay, cool. You want to wrap this thing up? I know that was a big meaty topic for today.
It really was.
Yeah.
It was, and I thought it was well done, Phil.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks.
I helped.
Oh, I think you did a fabulous job.
So, wrapping up, rough edges are a natural part of any role-playing game.
Yep, there are good types and bad types of rough edges.
The kind and frequency of rough edges give the game a certain feel.
You and your group are going to have a comfort zone about how many and what kinds of edges work for you.
It's very true. And then you can shift where the rough edges of a game are by creating house rules and using the game off label.
Finally, if the mix of rough edges is not where you're comfortable for a game, it's okay to go find another game.
It's very true. And that's it. Chat room, what do you have to say?
I want to light up
about
a cigarette,
anything?
man. Like, whew.
We got a little lost. Senda made another album for you guys.
Another album cover?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
The link is in there. It's wonderful. I was
I'm
totally
afraid.
supposed to interrupt the show.
Can somebody just
Not
go throw
there.
it in the G Plus community so that it can be there for everyone to see?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Senda, you can do that, right?
Thank you,
And so-
Queenie. Appreciate
So
it.
the entirety of the chat is taking phrases that you guys have been saying that would be amazing songs for that album.
Oh, that's
Great.
fantastic.
Great.
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful.
That's
in the best way possible.
That's not unlike when I did Rocker Boys and Vending Machines, and like every few minutes, we kept making up we kept making up
a
song
song list
names.
for the album. I know something's got it written down somewhere in a notebook. I know because I heard her talking about it on Gnomecast when I was on there with her.
Yeah, because it's on Twitter and G+.
I'm digging the cover.
Oh, is
of-
it the Rocker Boy and Vending Machine songs?
Oh, for that, I was
No.
your last album.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
The Sneeze X and the Hard Moves.
Yeah, that
Sneeze
has
X
an
and the Hard
album
Moves.
list.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, Go Straight to Failure is a fantastic title for an album.
Go straight to failure.
Yeah, it's a wonderful cover.
Is there
It
anything
is.
else?
The cover
in the
looks
chat
really
room?
good.
No.
We just got lost.
Okay, that's
It's
fine.
great.
I'm gonna do this. All right, so let's go to the community chatter. So the RPG a day 5. I really enjoyed the which cover do you think most captures the spirit of an RPG.
Oh, that was so good.
It was totally subjective, so it was interesting for me to see what folks' thoughts are on art and how that affected them when it came to role playing games. You picked Tales from the Loop.
I did. I mean, that cover, man.
Yeah,
that,
I picked Bubblegum Shoe because it just symbolizes the cover with the font and everything and the spyglass and the kids on it. Were like, oh, I mean, I know exactly what I'm doing in this game.
yeah, I mean, that was my feeling when I saw Tales from the Loop,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you're just standing there like, yep, that's my game. Like,
Yeah, Tales from the Loop, it threw me off because, like, I know what Tales from the Loop is, right? Like, just from the cover, I don't know if I would get what that game was about.
yeah, as soon as I saw those kids standing in front of those weird towers,
Yeah, you knew what it was?
I had a pretty good hunch. What sold me on Tales from the Loop is the cover and then the tagline.
I
Like,
mean,
the cover totally encapsulates
is
what...
the tagline on the cover?
I don't think it is. I think it's
Yeah.
on the back.
See, that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know what Bubblegum Shoe is
Yeah,
because
I mean,
the title's right there, and I see the kids doing
you
the
also
thing.
know what gumshoe is, though.
Well, I mean, I know what the word means.
Yeah.
Like, Tales from the Loop doesn't mean anything to me. That's what.
Yeah, but again, the title wasn't the thing we were talking about. It was the cover, right?
cover
And I
is-
guess the title accounts as
Yeah,
well. We weren't
the
just
title
talking about
counts as the
illustration.
cover. Like,
yeah.
I mean, in my beginning studies of cover art and cover design for books, like the title of your game matters, man.
It does.
Yeah.
It totally does. So yeah, I liked everyone's picks actually. People went through
too.
that. People went through that pick. I loved all of them.
I really like the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons one.
Oh, yeah. Well, which edition?
This is the one where the thief is climbing up on to pry the stone out of the.
Can I have your card for a second?
Why?
I'm sorry. What book did you say that was?
It's the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Now I'm gonna punch your card. It's the player's handbook.
Is it the player's handbook?
Yes, the one with the statue and they're prying the
Oh,
gems
yeah,
out of it.
that's the player's
the
handbook.
DM's guide is the
I
big
have it.
giant red demon holding the girl.
Dude, I don't remember any of that shit. Like, I have a terrible memory. I actually never owned any of
I'm
those
pretty
books.
sure you didn't own actually those editions of the book. By the time you owned them, they were the
Second edition ones?
no,
With the-
not even second edition. There was a reprinting of first edition with more modern covers.
I had the second edition ones.
You had 2E,
Yeah.
and those look completely different.
They're terrible.
There it wasn't good.
No, they're not good. That's bad.
Yeah.
Bad cover design. You know, I'm not really a big fan of the vampire one either. The green.
The vampire cover with the rose.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what makes that book is not the front cover. What sells that book is the back cover. The quote on the back cover of the original vampire book. Do you remember it, Nikki? The no prints.
I'm pretty sure I can find you the PDF in under 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have it also. But that back cover text about how no prince will hold domain over me, like by the time you finish reading it and you know this game's about vampires, you're like, hell yes, I'm playing this game. Yeah, that's a game for me where the front cover is like, oh, what is this book? I'm going to pick it up and look at it and then flip it over and read the back text and be like, yes. Oh, you know what game I should have put on there? I'm going to add one to the list.
Sure, go ahead.
Underground.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Man, that front cover of Underground with, what's his name? Major Mayhem, I think was his name. With his crazy ass gear and that like gun with the chainsaw blade and shit. Like the second I saw that cover, I was like, I'm totally in love with this game.
Yeah, there's a ton of good. That was my favorite thing was everybody putting up the art, like just dropping the art in there. I loved seeing all those. Okay, moving on. This was from JJ Lanza. Have any of the MMP podcasts taken a deep dive into the topic of Retro Clones Fantasy Heartbreakers? I am amazed to find more projects or products being discussed and released day after day. Really? Do we need one more game in this genre? Are they really that different from each other? Are there so many different versions that it is impossible to keep track of them all? Now with Wizards of the Coast making all editions of D&D available in PDF format, is there really a need? Do we really need so many versions of what essentially the same house rules, or what are essentially house rules? I'm not looking to rant, but rather, what is it about this genre that inspires, excites, and motivates individuals to invest so much creative energy?
So here's kind of the interesting thing. I have a fantasy heartbreaker.
I know you do.
I don't even like fantasy as much as I like other genres,
Yeah,
but I have a fantasy heartbreaker.
I love fantasy.
Well, I know you love fantasy.
Yeah, I just do.
I mean, for me, the defining thing was that as a little kid, I got into Star Trek and Star Wars before I saw Lord of the Rings or Hobbit.
I mean, that's cool. Star Wars is a fantasy game anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, for me, it was spaceships and shit like that, and that is not what D&D was.
That's true.
Like, I got into fantasy because I got into role-playing games, which is why my polygamer side, I got out of D&D the second I saw Boot Hill, Top Secret, Gamma World,
Yeah.
like all of those things. But I guess the point I'm making to JJ's point is, once I started designing shit, I went back and tried to make a fantasy heartbreaker. So there is some sort of draw that everyone feels like they have to put their own spin on fantasy.
Well, the two biggest games in the world, as far as role-playing games go, are Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder.
Yeah.
So
really, the two biggest games in the world are Dungeons and Dragons and the guys who copied over the Dungeons and Dragons rules and put their name on it.
sure, right? Like
They fixed a few things, but
no, you're not wrong.
I'm not wrong.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying like 80% of the people in the world, probably more, that play role-playing games are playing those games.
they do.
So they're prevalent. They're in the mindset.
Yeah.
So when people go out to design their first game, what do? What do we do when we try to make anything?
We copy
emulate
what we
the
see
thing
every
that we
day.
see. Yeah,
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
that's probably the biggest reason
Yeah.
why. I mean, if the first big role-playing game was Star Wars,
Yes. We would all be playing space fantasy.
it might be different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We would all, like, exactly. Or
Or if the first
Conan.
sure,
Like,
sure.
because for as much as we'll say that Conan is fantasy, it's sword and sorcery is different than high fantasy
Well, D&D
armor.
Dungeons and Dragons has a lot more to do, especially old Dungeons and Dragons, with the Conan stories than it does with the Lord of the Rings.
The stories, yes, but not all the mechanics.
I think the mechanics too.
I don't know.
I mean, it was a killer be killed kind of
didn't wear
world.
plate mail.
Yeah, but Conan had friends that wore plate mail, and Conan adventured with people.
I don't disagree. I mean, obviously we know. I mean, obviously if we go to Appendix N, obviously Howard was a huge influence on original D&D.
Those
so
games
I don't argue that.
Those games were challenge based anyway. They weren't about emulating stories.
I mean, hell, Conan didn't. I mean, Howard didn't keep Conan super consistent. Howard wrote Conan stories. Like he wrote,
Yeah, that too.
I mean,
well, let's just not call them. When we talk about Conan stories, I'm talking about also Fritz Leiber and Jack Vance and all those the real influencers on the Appendix Ners, I guess I could say.
Yeah, I mean, Elric series.
And the Appendix Ners that were more of the pulps that were writing in the pulps.
Yeah, I mean, a thing actually. I think I rather like. But yeah, I think Fantasy Heartbreakers. I think it's exactly what you said. We emulate what we see every day, and so we often we come at it. We also come at it because often when we start to design is because we are like, well, if I was going to do D&D, this is what I would do differently. Bam, you've just fallen into the Heartbreaker. Like you've just fallen into the Heartbreaker pit.
Yeah, so it's not one reason; it's a bunch of reasons, and a lot of it's sociological.
Yeah,
that would be my guess. I mean, I have no proof to back that up. I'm just armchair sociology.
And I think by and large, people like the fantasy genre.
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't think people hate. I mean, even though it's not my favorite genre, I love Dungeon World, right? Like I love certain. I'm now kindling my love for DCC. Like it's
we like that stuff, but that is not we look at like other forms of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not the most popular form of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the superhero genre is the most popular form of entertainment at the moment right now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And and yet there's not a super flood of
superhero games, and they're not popular. Like
no,
they're not the best sellers out there.
No, I mean if we look, you're right. If we look at who's making money in the box office, superhero movies are making money in the box office like hand over fist.
And in a lot of other ways, like modern fantasy is making a fair amount of cash here and there.
Mm-hmm.
If you assume that Twilight is a modern fantasy type story, or Harry Potter.
Well, that's better. Like that's
look, man, you cannot deny the box office draw of Twilight. So I mean, as much as I don't agree with it.
No, but let's just say that that Monster Hearts is a much better idea of what Twilight should be.
Well, sure, yeah, absolutely.
Not what it is. Like
but
what
even
it should be.
that game exists, right? No, it's not. I mean, it sells well, but it's not selling like hundreds of thousands of copies.
No. I mean, it sells well for the population that it does well in. But
correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's not dropping like 5e numbers. Nobody, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's a weird.
It was the first. It was the one that we're all accustomed to. It's the one that has the most marketplace awareness.
We all still have some love for it. I mean, I know plenty of indie designers who are playing D&D on the weekends.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's not a hey, we're gonna march off and we hate this stuff.
It's funny because I know a lot of D&D designers that are playing
indie games. Yeah, like we all story games, like whatever
we call them.
Gamers like games, man. Like I like games for certain things. I mean, a few years ago, if you had asked me about DCC, I probably would have laughed because I would have never gone near a book that big or whatever. But as I started to read it, I'm like, maybe this is just becoming more aware as a designer. But like as I'm reading through the book, I'm like, I see what this game is doing, and I like what this game is doing. Like the crazy ass dice. Like I get it. I see what it's doing, and I like it. The other thing I want to do, I'm going to do this on the side, and I think I'll post it to the G Plus community. There is a principle and an agenda in the text of DCC. Goodman doesn't call it out as that, but if you read through and see what sentences he hits more than once in the book, like you will find that there is an agenda and principles of that game codified in that book.
Most of the books that are trying to let people know how to play and run games, we'll sneak that in there.
Yeah, but I'm to the point, and we did a whole show about this in the past about agendas and principles. I would have loved it if Goodman had just scooped them up, shoved them in one section, and was like, look, here's the bullet points. Like this is what this game's about, and you can see it. I'm gonna go do the homework. Like I'm gonna go pour back through that PDF because I guarantee you I will piece together and it will look like It will look like Dungeon World's agenda and principles. It will look like a set of agendas and principles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're having a fun time with these
names. I'm not looking. I'm not watching the chat room today.
They're just.
Senda has a front and back cover posted to the G Plus community.
yeah, there
now.
we go.
So everyone
Fantastic.
go
Is there a
check it
track
out.
list?
There
Yeah.
is. That's the back cover.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
And it's all stuff y'all said this episode.
Oh, fantastic.
I mean, I feel like just my natural speech.
Is the name of the album Rough Edges?
No, I don't
Since
think
we
so.
No,
since
I think it's the
everything
failure one.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
And the last song title might be My Big Meaty Topic.
My big meaty topic. Interesting.
Actual exploding zombies. The social score. We're going long. That's obviously for me.
yeah.
The smash and grab. Filling the clock.
Oh, nice.
Break it down. Definition panda. Oh, I like that one. I feel like is a guitar. Like there's a tambourine and,
Did
an
anybody
acoustic
say
guitar in there.
that? Break it down, definition panda.
No, that was side chat.
Yeah,
But I like that
figured as
one.
much.
Sweet spot of rough edges.
The sweet spot of rough
That
edges.
is such a fucking 90s song.
Yeah, right?
Like I don't even know what to
that's
do
a,
with
that's
that.
a Ditch Lilies tune, right?
Oh, that is, the Ditch
tune.
Lilies remade that song. I think they totally ditched Ruling on the Fly.
Nice.
Recognized Precedent. That I think is
a
more of
good
an
one.
anthem.
Sure, that's fine.
Off-label use. Make Us Uncomfortable. That's also a bit 90s.
It's a bit 90s, yeah.
Genre Dissidence. Oh, I like that one a lot. That's good.
What was that? What was the last one? Not the one that you just read. The one before that.
Make Us Uncomfortable.
That feels like it's a Robin Knives song instead of Robin Sparkles song.
Yeah. Genre Dissonance. That I think is like some sort of that's I think like a bit more techno-y.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because it's all like weird sounds and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's making you uncomfortable.
It's your experimental song.
Yeah, and My Big Meaty Topic.
Big meaty topic. That's a good track list.
That's an 80s. That's one of those 80s. We're gonna do it all night songs, like drugs, sex, rock and roll songs. My Big Meaty Topic goes all night long. My Big Meaty Topic goes long. There we go. That's a remix. You guys are fantastic. We love you.
One more thing. Here we go. Check it out.
Hi, Chris, Phil, Bob, and listeners. This is Avi the Jackal, and I have a question about storytelling. Chris has mentioned on several occasions that Eastern storytelling techniques differ from Western storytelling techniques. I would love to hear some further explanation of what these different techniques are, how they differ, and when I might want to use one rather than another. For context, the only thing that I might be familiar with as a Western storytelling technique is the 3-act structure. As always, thanks for your help. I love the show. Keep up the good work. Thanks in advance. Avi the Jackal.
So I am not going to answer that tonight. We're going to put a pin in that
Oh,
and
boy,
make
are
that a
we gonna-
topic.
Oh boy, are we gonna put a pin in that?
Because that's a topic for
Oh.
a whole show. But I wanted to play it because Avi sent it in.
Oh
so.
no, it's great. And Avi,
Can,
we will.
can
we
you
will
pin that? Ding.
Ding.
Yeah, we will get to work on that. That is that's
Yeah.
going to take a little bit of research.
It's going to take some work.
How is your Eastern story structure?
I might have some resources for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've done the work
Okay.
on that, but
Because
I
mine,
mean,
I don't think is going
you
to be
can
as
look
strong.
at a lot of Miyazaki stuff for it.
No, I'm with you. I know where. I mean, I know what we're looking at. I'm not sure I'm the person.
Really,
who
one of my
speaks.
most classic movies to point at for that, for Western audiences to look at. Like, this is kind of an Eastern story. Is My Neighbor Totoro. Like, that's a very Eastern story. Like, they don't have a lot of like Western stories have plots that like you can see where the protagonists are trying to achieve certain goals.
Perhaps QCC time ish.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll watch. Maybe we'll have a viewing of My Neighbor Totoro.
And there's a whole lot of other things that go along with that, but like the base idea is like protagonists are trying to achieve things. Often in Western storytelling, they get thrust into situations where they are trying to overcome challenges and get to goals. Eastern storytelling can often have a lot of slice of life stuff in it. These are just kind of like people living their lives and the parts of their lives that come up as you're sort of like voyeuristically watching it happen. And that's why Totoro's are great for that, because it's fantastical. So it's interesting to watch, but it's really about the life of these two kids and what has happened since they're now in the situation where their mom is very sick and they're living with their dad in this new place.
Yeah. So, Avi, we love this topic, and we're going to get to work.
Yeah.
I mean, break out the chalkboards.
It's gonna be
and-
more. Yeah, there'll be more on that one. This is a very me topic. Really, I love that. Kind
It
of
is
stuff.
very much. I'm going to have to take the Western side of this so I can say denouement a few times.
So you can say the grammar school story structure.
Oh my God, I love grammar school story. I've gotten more mileage out of grammar school story structure. Should thank my eighth grade English teacher for teaching me that stupid triangle thing.
We could talk about how that 3-act stuff it exists, but it is not necessarily real.
Okay, love it.
That's it. Okay.
Do it.
Patreon shoutouts.
Yep.
Remy Bilodeau, Noah Bond, Stacy Winters, Todd Crapper, Blaze Bear, David Walker, Avi, Wakesburg, the Knights of the Night Crew, Austin Lemke, Glenn Seiler, who will be here on the show next week, hopefully.
I'm just gonna say, maybe if you patron the show a lot, we might let you on it. Like that's a. It doesn't hurt.
You have to live it helps if you live in Buffalo, though.
It actually does help if you live in Buffalo. So Chris and I very much like to actually talk face to face. So remote is always trickier.
Yeah,
We used to
absolutely.
record this thing. Remember we used to record this thing?
Yeah,
like
it
that?
wasn't as good.
It wasn't as good.
And the secret weapon of the show, Drew Smith.
Hey, when Drew Smith wants to come up here, he can
He
come
always,
sit on the
you know,
show.
he's always welcome. If he's listening, Drew, if you're listening, you're always welcome.
There's a chair right here next to me.
Have a whole nother microphone.
Yeah,
that
man.
you
We'll
can
put
just pull
Smith
right
there.
out.
Absolutely. All right, let's roll into the closing.
Thank you, everyone, so much for listening.
If you're free Tuesday evenings, 8:45 p.m. Eastern, 6:45 p.m. the Queen's time, you're welcome. Come join us on Twitch, where you can chat with the other listeners in the ever awesome and mostly silly chat room for life. But feel free to ask us the occasional question.
If you cannot make it to the live show, check out our podcast each week wherever you get your podcasts, and take a listen to some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Down with D&D, Threats from Gallifrey, Advantage to Insight, Pandas Talking Games, with what was the name of that song? What was the name?
The Definition Panda.
Yeah, what was the name of it though?
You guys are killing me.
Break It Down Definition Panda or
Yes,
something?
there you go.
Break It Down Definition Panda. That's a great song. I kind of want that to exist as a real thing. Cypher Speak with Darcy and Troy, the Gnome Cast, the Streets of Avalon with the Wednesday Evening Podcast All-Stars, and Hobbs and Friends of the OSR.
So
I'm not done yet.
You're not done yet. Damn it. Keep
Sorry,
going.
man.
Keep going.
You can and should also check out some of our brother and sister podcasts. She's a Super Geek, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming NBS.
After you've finished your session and before you codify your rulings into house rules, leave us some feedback. You can reach us directly, Chris at misdirectedmark.com.
No, you should never really codify your rulings in the house rules. I'm just kidding. Go ahead. That's me, by the way.
Phil at misdirectedmark.com. You can email Bob at misdirectedmark.com.
He's in the chat room.
You can send us stuff for Nikki. So if you want to email us stuff, just send it to one of us.
I mean, if you're in the Slack room, you can bother her if you're
Exactly.
I mean, she's on Facebook. You can just get her there.
Distract me from work, please.
There you go.
check out our Facebook group. Hit us up on Twitter at misdirectedmark, at DNA Phil, at
IT Gamer Girl.
IT Gamer Girl, the Light 101.
That's me.
Robert M. Everson, because we still love him until his return. I feel like we're gonna have a whole parade on the show when he
I have to
returns.
get some music for it.
Yeah, and always check out our G Plus community. That's where all the big stuff goes.
There was no joke there.
I know. Sorry.
I feel like it's a rough edge.
Aw.
If you like what we do here and other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can support our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MMP. Patrons get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, and I feel like there should be some now that we have a whole album worth of them to make. The Pandas Talking Games bonus outtakes, D&D offerings when we can put them out there, and other special releases. With that, I will say this has been a Misdirected Mark production, which is the media arm of Encoded Designs. And Phil, will you please punch the mic as I say mic drop?
Do we have a rule for that? We out.